My name is Maurice Cottman. My graduation year is 2012 for my bachelor, 2017 for my master's degree from St. Joseph's University, as I like to say, the best university in the Philadelphia region. I am currently the inaugural director for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the College of Veterinary Medicine at Washington State University. My current role is very, very fascinating. So veterinary medicine, I don't know if you or anybody who will listen to this know the field of veterinary medicine, but there's only 32 accredited schools in the entire country that produce vet med. And so it's very, 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 very hard to get into school, not only get into school, but to have a program that's accredited in that kind of way. So veterinary medicine actually is harder to get into than human medicine school. So my role is to figure out the diversity aspect of it. Vet med actually, if you look at the stats, is either between 94 or 90, depending on which one you look at, is 90% white, 90 to 94% white. So it is considered the least diverse field in all of American jobs in the entire country. So my job is to really identify why that may be, give out new opportunities for people who might want to become a veterinary a veterinary a veterinary it's hard to say veterinary practitioner because there's so many different levels that you can go with the career. You know, you could just focus on the animals as a whole. You can give them actual care. You could be a surgeon. You could just focus on science and the genetics related to it. So anything adjacent to veterinary medicine, my job is to figure out a way in which to make it a lot more equitable for people to be a part of it outside of what the standard is for the field. And I look at it in a three-pillar system, Mike. Like it's really one of those things where I look at it as pre-arrival. So, what's our marketing materials look like? Who are we reaching out to? Who do we think we should invite into this selected club of ours called veterinary medicine? And why is that? Recently I was working with our admissions team and I told them that I want to know why you said no to an applicant as much as I want to know why you said yes to an applicant. Because if the grades are equal, because that's the first barrier, you have to have specific grades and specific classes. You have to take all of those things. If all of that is equal, why do you prefer one student over the other one? And I want to have a conversation around that. And they've never had to have those conversations. So my job really is looking at how equitable our resources are, how equitable our team is, how equitable our outreach is to the people who not only want to come here to study, but the people who work here. We're in a small town, Pullman, Washington. Most people have never heard of it unless you've been here and that kind of a thing. It almost borders Idaho, and people feel strongly about it in either way. People either love it or they feel like it needs to change. And I'm really here to put my finger on that pulse and figure out what we really can do when it comes to our community that we have inside of this town for people who are from here and not from here. And that's a long-winded way of me saying that I'm looking at our faculty, staff, and students as it relates to DEI initiatives and figuring out what we can do, what we should do, and what may or may not work based around, historically speaking, the things that we have been doing and the things we haven't been doing. I think one of the reasons why it's so hard for me is because I realized that I've been doing DEI stuff my whole life, but I wasn't doing it professionally until about 10 years ago. So me being a Black man in America, I've always had this inclination to do more. When people ask me what are my goals in life, I can answer simply that I want to make this place better than I found it. And this place is Earth, is America, are the people in the communities that I'm in. And it's been interesting for me because I think diversity and inclusion are hot button conversations, they're hot button topics. They are things that are coming up all of the time. However, I don't think a lot is really being done in the fields in a certain kind of way. And what I mean by that is when I look at DEI as a whole, I think the bar is kind of sort of on the floor. When people say we're going to jump over that bar, I'm looking where is the bar? Because it doesn't really feel like we're moving the needle that much. If people really want to look historically, at least at America, look historically, at least at America, the Civil Rights Act isn't even 60 years old yet. So 60 isn't that long. I have grandmothers who are in their 70s and their 80s. So if we really want to talk about how far we've come, we haven't come too far in the time that we're pushing forward. And I think that that's important to note because as Americans, we don't talk about our history in the way in which I think the rest of the world talks about their history. Like I think that for people, they think that a lot of the things that have happened in our country are so far removed from who they are and the impacts that it has. And if they really looked at the dates of said things, they'll realize that it was rather recent. And we are still, I believe, definitely double check me, I think that we are still the youngest country of our magnitude in the whole world. So we are not that old of a community. We're not that old of a society. And we're not that old of a people to be able to just be indoctrinated the way in which I think we already are. So I'm really a disruptor, Mike. Like I love to do those types of things. Like I was born pretty much at my aunt's wedding. Like my mom went into labor at her sister's wedding. So I've been disrupting since birth. I've been put on this earth to do these types of things. I think communication is probably the biggest skill that I need in my current job to be successful. And communication is something that I had going into SJU, but it was really adapted once I was there. I remember my first, this is how old I am. When I got to SJU, we weren't allowed to pick our classes. So for the first semester of our freshman year, they were already picked for us. So I feel like I got set up. I was a chemistry major, so I had chemistry lab, Spanish lab. Then I had like philosophy and religion. I'm like, when am I going to sleep if I got to read all of these dense topics? And I remember my first religious class, Father Godfrey, my guy to this day, Father Godfrey, a Jesuit. He walked in and it was religion. And he was like, how many of y'all believe in God? And I was like, oh, this seems like a trick question. You're trying to catch us slipping. I know what's going on, Father Godfrey. You're going to say you believe in God. And he was like, I also believe in God. I can't prove that he exists, but I hope I'm right. I dedicated 50 years of my life to him. And I was like, okay, this is different. I wasn't expecting this aspect of it. And I've had religious classes before, but I've never had a religious class that allowed me to question religion. So that was a communication aspect there that I thought I had. But realistically speaking, I don't think I actually had until I took that course. And the first readings he ever gave to us were of atheist writers. So he didn't even go to his playbook of like, oh, I'm Catholic and this is what you should be reading. He was like, I'm going to give you things for people who completely disagree with how I look at life. And we're going to openly talk about it. So communication has been pivotal because I learned in college that if you don't question the things that you actually believe in, do you actually believe in them? If you don't question the things that you disagree with, do you actually disagree with them? Or is it all just a facade to a certain extent? And SJU really helped me with that because I was one of the few Black people on Hawk Hill who didn't play a sport for a scholarship. So I'm there on an academic level. So I'm here having these conversations and thinking these things and trying to put the pieces together in a way that a lot of my peers who I knew didn't have to because they are there in a completely different track of mine. So communication is definitely number one. Number two to me is being able to allow others to have differing opinions and being okay with not agreeing, because I think that, at least for me growing up as a kid, agreeing to disagree was kind of like coded language for saying, I don't respect what you believe. But as I've gotten older, I've realized it's one of the greatest gifts I've ever been afforded, where I can agree to disagree. I can respect you as a person. Like if me and you are having a discourse and I completely disagree with you believing, but you deeply believe in it, I can look at you and say, I agree to disagree, but I'm not disrespecting you. And I never learned that until I got older in life. So when I'm going through these diversity and inclusion conversations, a lot of times people want to have thoughts and opinions that I completely disagree with and vehemently disagree with some of them. But I have to realize that it's not always a direct attack on me as a person. It's just more about how we view the world, and it could be different. And that leads me to the third one, which is I like to reevaluate myself every single year as it relates to the things that I believe in and the things that I am perpetuating. And I think that enough of us don't do that necessarily. I think that a lot of times we as people look around and we think that our way is the way. Like it's kind of like as they say, the lie is the truth doesn't matter when the lie is more entertaining. And I think that a lot of times we forget that our opinions are not necessarily facts, but we treat our opinions as if they are facts because there could be no other way but our opinion. So really breaking those things down and reevaluating the way I'm looking at life and the people in my life and the people who may not actually be in my life, but as an empath, I'm looking at them from afar. It really has allowed me to view my time on Hawk Hill differently as I progressed in life, because it's a Catholic school, 100% a Catholic school. However, when you look at other Catholic schools, it's a lot more liberal with the way in which we are allowed to look at Catholicism. And it's a lot more liberal when it comes to the way we look at change. Like I tell people all the time, Jesuits to me are just the gangsters of the Catholic Church. Like they're the ones who are standing next to people being like, gay people are real people, like this is what we're doing here. Or like when leprosy was a thing, they were the ones on front line and center trying to take care of people who had leprosy. Like, so they are the ones who are like, these are people. We got to look at people first, and then we look at everything else as it attached. So I'm very proud of being able to be considered a Hawk and an alumni of St. Joe's University, especially, this is a little one, you might want to cut this one out. They gave me no real fiscal reason to go to St. Joe's. Like when you look at, I applied for, I think 8 to 9 colleges. I got into all of them. St. Joe's gave me the least amount of money related to my education. And me being a first generation student, I had to really think about that. Like I didn't have people who could help me pay for it. I didn't know how to pay for it all. And I remember vehemently that like St. John's in Queens University in Queens, New York, gave me like $200,000, Mike, like $200K. I think St. Joe's gave me like $5,000. So it was really, I came to St. Joe's because it felt right. Everything on paper didn't tell me to go there. I didn't want to be in Philadelphia. I didn't necessarily want to go to a Catholic university, even though I was Catholic at the time and practicing. I just felt like it made more sense for me to go there, and it felt right. And I always said, like, if I didn't like it, I could transfer. So St. Joe's really gave me a great foundation to be the professional that I am today. Get uncomfortable. I think St. Joe's as a whole, we like to tell people how great we are when it comes to the service that we do in the communities. Like I've done, I want to say like 8 service trips based around St. Joe's participation as a student and as an adult facilitator. However, I do realize that a lot of times, a lot of our students and a lot of our Hawk family, they don't want to be uncomfortable. They want to feel good about what's going on, but they don't want to be the reason why somebody feels bad. So it's almost like that freeze aspect to fight or flight, whereas like I could push forward and really examine what's going on, but I don't feel good about it. So I'm not going to do anything. When I was there, I was in like 8 or 9 different clubs. I had to drop a lot of them because I just realized there's not that much time in the day. But I was in like the Latin Student Association, I was in like the Asian Student Association. I was in a lot of different ethnic clubs for which I didn't identify with, but I wanted to learn and I wanted to push forward with these organizations because I thought they were important. And a lot of times I felt uncomfortable. Like I did. Like I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't speak the language. I don't, dance to the same beat. Like there's a lot going on there. And I realized that some of the best relationships I've ever had was because I was uncomfortable. So I think that if you are willing to be uncomfortable, then you are easily willing to make a deep change. And I think that's the second point where it's like, you have to question yourself. You have to question what you believe and you have to question the people around you. And now I don't mean it in a negative way. And I think sometimes when we say I'm being questioned, it sounds negative. I think sometimes it's like, whoa, like, what do you mean you're questioning me? It's kind of like when you have your parents or you have your caretakers and they're like, you better not question me. And it's because it's viewed as like you're attacking me. But realistically speaking, we are not necessarily attacking the person, we're attacking the thought. And if we never attack the thought, then we don't really grow. I think one of the worst things that we can do to other people in this world is to say like, well, why is this the way that it is? And then the answer be because I said so. Because that's not based on anything but a feeling. And if we only base it on a feeling, are we really taking in the facts? Are we really taking in what's going on? Or is it just like, you are right and I am wrong, so where do we go from there? And I think that a place like St. Joe's that allows you to question a lot of things, just like other higher education institutions, allows you to grow in a way in which you may not get in a company. My first degree is in business. You may not get that in finance. You may not get that in marketing. You may not get it in those kind of ways. So when you're at a place like St. Joe's as a student specifically, questioning things and allowing yourself to bump your head a lot of bit, not a little bit, a lot of bit, will help you get to the point of where I'm in my life, because I can talk to people who do not believe in the things that I'm saying and have an articulate conversation with them and it not be negative, as opposed to if I was coming into the conversation with the mindset I had before I came to St. Joe's, it could just be an argument. And it just being an argument is usually not that conducive to change. I don't know about you, Mike, but when I was at Joe's, I went to a good amount of networking opportunities, and I realized, and this could be a me thing, and I understand if it's a me thing because like being from Philadelphia, you have a certain mindset that's a lot different than other people. But it felt weird to me that people didn't realize that networking nights and networking opportunities are two-sided. Like it really felt like people were like, I gotta impress you because you are the person here today. And I always looked at it like this is a two-way street. To me, networking is like a relationship. I can't just be out here giving you my resume and telling you how great I am, and you just sitting back being like, so tell me more. Like to me, I need to know why I want to be in a collaboration with you. So I think that communication is pivotal. And I think that realizing that it really is like a relationship, it really is like a communicative opportunity where you should not have to feel like you're bending over backwards. It should feel like we are on the same wavelength and we're both giving to get something back out of it. I tell my students when they're going on like job interviews, for instance, I'll be like, you do know you have the right to negotiate. And they look at me like the offer should be the negotiation. And I just can't accept that. Like I think that too often we put power in people and put power in things that don't necessarily need or deserve that power. But we look at it as a sense of, I should be happy with what you offer me because you don't have to offer me. And we don't realize that if you don't offer it to me, you're going to have to offer it to somebody else. So when it comes to networking, we got to be more honest about asking questions. We got to be more honest about strategizing about offers. We have to be able to negotiate and we have to be able to feel comfortable. I think a lot of times with networking, people feel so uncomfortable because they think they have to play a part as opposed to realizing that you are the part to be played. You don't have to play a part. You can come being you. You can wear your natural hair. You can wear your natural clothes. You can do these things and say these things, and it will make it a lot easier when you actually have to show up for work or show up for partnerships as opposed to just feeling like you have to play a part. There are a lot. There are a lot. I know for me, being in the DEI field, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I never wanted to be the black guy who just is the black guy. Like what a lot of people think of, they'd be like, oh, he's black. Of course he wants to talk about diversity. Of course he wants to talk about inclusion. And I felt that for a lot of times, like I didn't get a chance to choose my race. I didn't get a chance to choose a lot of these things. They were bestowed upon me and I had to learn how to work with them. There's a reason why, if you talk to any of my colleagues from past or present, they probably never heard me raise my voice because I know what it looks like. I don't want to be viewed as the angry black guy. I don't want to be viewed as like, look at them, they're all like we thought they were, and all of those kind of things. So race is really a big part of it, where people might think it's a strength, and it can be, 100% can be. However, a lot of the times when you're talking about DEI stuff and you're coming at it from a perspective that is not the majority, it could be looked at as selfish because it's like, well, of course, you're the one who wants to bring these things up or what's really going on. So that's definitely been a big one. Age is another one. In higher education specifically, ageism is massive. Ageism is rampant, and I think a lot of times we think ageism is we are ex-naying older people, but realistically speaking, in higher education, if you are under a certain threshold of age, you get looked at as like you don't know what you're talking about. You can't be an expert in this. I'm 40 plus and I have 3 degrees. Why would I listen to you to a certain extent? When I was working at St. Joe's, I remember I used to have a front desk job and I had students who worked for me. And I remember multiple times professors would come in to my office and start berating me and start talking to me in a way in which is less than humane, I would say. And I would literally look at them, Mike, and I'd be like, who are you talking to? And they would be taken aback, like, what do you mean who I'm talking to? So I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, we not doing this. And they would be like, well, tell me, who are you? And I would tell them my position and I would tell them who I work for. And most of the time they would look at me and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were a student. I'm like, so you were talking to a student this way? Like, what are you saying in that kind of a way? So ageism is a very big barrier. I think resolve is another one. Like this will be the last one I name. I can name so many, but like resolve is a big one. I think that for a lot of people, they haven't been taught resolve. They haven't been taught the ability to bounce back. They haven't been taught to work through turmoil and strife. They've been taught to cancel that turmoil or strife. They've been taught to erase that turmoil or strife. And realistically speaking, we can't do that in the real world. But we're not teaching the people coming under us that you can't really do that. We're not teaching them that canceling somebody on social media is real, because it's not. We're not teaching that you're going to be around people who don't have the same beliefs as you politically, religiously, just indirectly, everyday life. They're going to be different, and you have to learn how to work with them and work around a lot of those things as opposed to completely getting rid of them. So I think resolve is something that needs to happen. I think I joke about it, but I'm serious at the same time, where I think one of the biggest detriments we ever did to children is that we took dodgeball out of schools because it was too aggressive. It was too violent. It felt like bullying, because you have to realize that you have to use the skills that you have and your natural ability to offset people who might have more or might have a different way of living or have the ability to throw that ball a lot harder than you have. You have to learn how to work within that strife and within those things in order to become successful. And instead of us teaching those lessons, we just took those things away. And I don't necessarily think that bullying and like pressures of the outside world are necessarily a great thing. However, I think that what comes from that pressure is a diamond. In my personal life, I always say pressure does one of two things. It makes a diamond or a burst of pipe. So you want to shine or be soggy. It means I shouldn't have a job. That's really what it means to me. Like, I actually just had a meeting with a group of students and I told them every day I'm working to be unemployed. And they looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, if we get to a point of where we figured it out, then that's a win. That's definitely a win. And I think diversity and inclusion specifically, because you didn't say equity, Mike, so you can't go back on this question. So diversity and inclusion specifically, they are hot button conversations, hot button topics that people still don't understand. There's diversity in every single thing that we do, every single part of our life that we lead, whether we are from the same state, have the same race, have the same religion, have the same background, there's still diversity there. And we need to expose that diversity for the positive as opposed to the negative. A lot of times diversity gets exposed for the negative. It's like, well, look at these group of people who are doing differently than this group of people. Yes, that's definitely part of it. However, if we never really articulate how important diversity is, then we will literally be running circles around ourselves. If you don't have somebody in your cohort or your crew or your family or your friend group who have a different thought, are you really growing with your thoughts? If you don't have difference of race in your area, in your position, in your company, do you really understand what it means to be racist, or what it means to degrade a certain group of people, or what it means to have ideologies and thoughts related to groups of people that you don't know or understand? And diversity is something that to me has been co-opted. Like it's really been co-opted because we don't really want inclusion. That's the thing. Like, to me, diversity, we say this is such a minuscule way of looking at it, but I think it makes sense for simplicity focuses, where it's diversity is like a guest list to a party. Do we have Mike there? Do we have Maurice there? Do we have Sarah there? Do we have Becky there? Check, 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 check. Inclusion is being asked to dance at that party, being appreciated for being there, being happy to be in a room is not good enough anymore. Having a seat at the table, in my opinion, is no longer good enough. You need to have a full meal at that table. You need to be able to eat. You need to be able to be a part of something that's living and growing, and something that can translate beyond yourself. I think a lot of times with diversity and inclusion, we only look at it for a very blip in time. We look at it for a moment, and we look at it in a way in which is like, okay, this happened that one time. Remember in 2020 when we had 13 people come from this area? Wasn't that great? It becomes a check mark. And we have to realize that inclusion is a living, breathing thing. Diversity can be a check mark 100%, but inclusion can't be. And you have to have both of those together to make legitimate change and impact people in a seismic way. 100% they've influenced me. However, I think the lack of them have influenced me more. I know how hard it is as a Black man to want to get through life in general, but to get to life and be successful is a whole different conversation. I think as a Black man, people love to show you the one that made it. They love to tell you about the one person who, like, look how far he's come. Look at how great he's doing. Like I joke with my white friends and my white colleagues that, like, as a Black man, when I do something that's considered normal, is looked at as extraordinary. Never been to jail? You don't got no kids out of wedlock? What's good? Like, I'm like, neither have you. And they look at me like, yeah, but. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Like, what's going on? It's almost like we're living in two different realities at the same exact time. And the lack of understanding and the lack of care has definitely affected me way more than the stipulations put in place to help me feel more secure. Like interviewing me because I'm Black, because legally you have to, as it relates to certain job opportunities, does less for me as a person than me not feeling connected or fit in because I'm the only one there. And I think that the lack of support and the lack of care and the lack of thought related to the inclusion aspect of it all is one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because I know what it feels like to feel othered. I know what it feels like to feel like to understand that nobody here understands you. I know what it feels like to go through life and you realize that people are being super nice to you because they don't want you to know how they really feel. All of those things to me have impacted me way more than the policies and procedures that are put in place to make me feel more included. Instead of me giving directly specific resources as it relates to names, I would give you resources as it relates to philosophy. So I'm not going to tell you to go and study certain personality quizzes, but I would say maybe as a unit, take personality quizzes. I'm not going to tell you exactly which books to read, but I would tell you should be reading. I'm not going to tell you exactly which websites to visit, but I would tell you that if you aren't looking into these websites, then you are being missed very rapidly of news that is happening every single minute. Not every moment necessarily, but every single minute things are happening and what's going on. And you should be well read. You should be well versed. You should know who the people are you can tap into. You should know real history as opposed to history. Get it? You should be tapped into those things. And I believe, this is Maurice Cottman thought, that you shouldn't only be tapped into those things that you agree with. Like if you are on a certain spectrum of political aspects, then you should look at the other side as well. If you're on a certain scope of religious aspects, you should look at the other side. You should know what a healthy debate is. I think in today's world, we all think that we have the tools to debate. We all think we're experts in certain things, and some of us are, a lot of us really aren't, but we think these things, but we don't realize what it means to debate. Debating, if you look at high school debates, let alone college and professional debates, you're supposed to be able to argue both sides of the point. In today's world, we only want to argue our side of the point. That's not a debate. That's an argument. That's a lot different. So if you aren't well educated on these things, if you don't take the time to understand the other side, even if you don't agree with it, it's different from agreeing, then what are you really bringing to the table as opposed to just a one-sided view of life? So you have to be well read, read real history. Don't just read the stories that they tell us in school. If you don't know about a community, pick up a book, watch documentary related to those communities. Don't just accept in America who we tell you are the heroes. I say this and people look at me crazy, but all Black people didn't pick Martin Luther King Jr. America did, and they told us that's our hero. And I love Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. However, I'm way more Malcolm X than Martin Luther King Jr. And there's no holiday dedicated to Malcolm X. His family had to fight to get a stamp. So that should tell you that there's a lot more to history. There's a lot more to communication. There's a lot more to ideologies, even if the same outcome is what they both were fighting for. There's different ways to get to it. And we as a people have to realize that there isn't just one track to the same answer. And we should have the wherewithal to investigate all of those tracks, because we're in a privileged position as Americans. Like, we have access to pretty much anything as it relates to information, where if you look around the world, a lot of countries are not allowed to look into a lot of these things, and we are. Take advantage of it. Really, really question yourself, so that when you do question others, it's coming from a place of learning as opposed to a place of propaganda.